The same-sex marriage law has won Andrew Cuomo big points among Democrats, but it comes after months of policies that are actually out of the Republicans' playbook, including fighting with unions and cutting school aid. With plenty of talk about Cuomo's political future going on, his blend of left and right is getting a lot of attention as well. One of the people who is trying to analyze all of this is former Assemblyman Richard Brodsky. He is joining me now from New York City. Assemblyman, how are you?
I'm great, Liz. Nice to be back with you.
It is great to see you. Okay, so you have coined some new phrases: progractionary, congressive, caniberal, libactionary. I have a hard time saying these. Which one of these do you prefer?
Well, I think we're going to let the public make that choice.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of labels generally, but when they lead you to a discussion of something more important and something deeper, then they can be useful. And I think the point is that there's some kind of national political beast emerging out of Albany that is different from what people have expected, and it's worth commenting on.
Okay, but here's what I don't understand. I've always thought that it's not so unusual to be fiscally conservative and socially liberal. I mean, there are a lot of people who are like that. One might say that George Pataki was more or less like that.
Well, this is not just about conservative and liberal in that sense. The Cuomo economic policies came out of a hard right Republican playbook. It was, for example, the refusal to extend the millionaire's tax, not just impose a new tax. It cost him with important Democratic constituencies, and I think rightly so. And if you then look at his embrace of identity politics and his use of it to craft an image, a political persona that is more acceptable to mainstream Democrats, it's really quite unusual, because both the Republican side and the Democratic side were sort of at the extremes. You can be an identity politics guy without having engaged in the marriage equality, gay marriage debate. You can be a sort of a fiscal conservative or moderate without having embraced the hard rhetoric that we saw out of the budget fight.
Okay, but how is this so surprising? Because really one might argue that Andrew Cuomo actually learned at the knee of probably the best triangulator there is, and that's Bill Clinton, not Mario Cuomo necessarily.
I think it's the degree to which the triangle is, if you will, extreme in its outer points. It was not just a governor saying, look, we've got to moderate our spending policies. We can't afford to do the things we'd like to do. It was the adoption of a Republican economic theory almost that said taxes were per se the problem, that spending was per se the problem, and the rhetoric that came with it. And this is Mario Cuomo's kid, and I think it surprised a lot of people. On the other side of the identity politics, this was not just paying a real and appropriate attention to the needs of ethnic minorities or language groups or even folks in the gay community. This was taking a very hard-edged issue, the issue of marriage equality, and making it a signature issue. So I don't think that, and there's nothing new under the sun. I don't think Andrew invented something, but I think the use of it as an entree into the national political scene is noteworthy. And if it becomes sellable, it will mean that a lot of the traditional Democratic agenda, fairness to the middle class, taxing the rich, making sure that there was money to invest in the social systems of the country, that may be a thing of the past.
Okay, but Richard, one might argue that that's not actually such a bad thing. If you look at polls today, you see that most people identify as centrists or not politically labeled, or independents with a small I, if you will. I know that the extremes are skewing politics to the right or to the left, but most people, voters, actually consider themselves fairly in the middle.
Oh, I don't think what Andrew did in the budget was in the middle, and I think that's the point. If you look at those same polls, they'll show that the vast majority of New Yorkers and Americans think the rich are not paying their fair share, that the millionaires got away with murder, that the concentration of wealth, where 1% of the people of the state of New York now own 35% of the wealth, that's a real problem that Democrats should address. Andrew did not choose to do that.
Okay, that's true, but they also believe that government generally doesn't work. And Andrew Cuomo, one might argue, made government work. I mean, he got all these things done, right? He actually created action in Albany.
He had a very successful record in making the machinery respond. The point I'm making in the column is that the national implications of this are those of a new kind of beast. I don't think the Democratic Party, frankly, is ready to walk away from that same history. The things that created the New Deal, Social Security, Medicare, the Great Society, the Kennedy years, I'm not so sure that the American public, and certainly not the Democratic primary voter, is willing to say, well, that's just the past. We're all new, moderate, or hard right economic reactionaries. I do think that Andrew understood he paid a significant price for those constituencies, including but not limited to labor unions. And I do think that they thought this through very carefully and are trying to construct a new kind of democratic liberal, that is, someone who's out front on social issues, especially identity politics, but someone who can go as far right as Andrew did on the economic stuff.
Well, how does that hurt?
It's not chopped liver, Liz. It's not chopped liver.
I am not suggesting that it is chopped liver. I happen to be a fan of chopped liver, actually, Mr. Brodsky, and so I am not denigrating chopped liver in any way. But let me ask you this. On the national level, though, how does this hurt him? I mean, could one argue that this will actually hurt him because you need the unions, for example, if you want to mount a national campaign?
Well, I think in fairness to Andrew, I don't think he's calculating every move he makes based on whether the unions like it or dislike it.
No, I agree. I agree.
I do think that it was the extent to which he articulated the same economic policies which Paul Ryan articulates on the national level, and which Carl Palladino articulated in New York.
Whoa, wait, hold on. You're comparing in the same sentence Andrew Cuomo, Carl Palladino, and Paul Ryan? In the same sentence.
If you look at the economic issues and the ideas that generated them, yes. If you're looking at their personalities, their competence, indeed their ability to relate to average human beings, no. Focus on what is at issue here.
Okay,
if the Democratic Party decides that you can embrace the slash spending, don't tax millionaires, government's the problem and the unions are the problem, as its economic heart, all it will have left for progressives are the identity politics.
Okay, but hold on.
And I don't think that's going to work.
Okay, he did not go so far as, say, Scott Walker in Wisconsin by saying you can't collectively bargain unions. I mean, he struck a contract deal with CSCA,
I'm not going to let you trap me into saying that Andrew Cuomo is the Republican right. I didn't say that. And it's not true. What I said was that if you look at the economic policies that defined his early months and defined his budget, they went well beyond what I think a moderate Republican or a moderate Democrat would have done. And I think they understood that. I think they understood the price they were paying, and I think they have very competently advanced this notion of, look, I'm leading the parade on identity politics as a counter to that, hoping that in the out years, as the economy improves, he'll be able to return to the democratic economic theories that are popular among the Democratic base to this day.
Well, we shall see, right? I mean, only time will tell, and unfortunately we have run out of time here, but I want to thank you very much, Richard Brodsky. I know you will be back, and in the meantime, have a good day.
You too.